Mr. Armstrong, if you could please describe music in the before the punk era in the 60s up until the early 70s and how that became punk.
Right. I think what happened, in the '60s, there was political music, there was protest music that got people excited. I mean, if all these, I mean, if you watch a documentary on the '60s, "Fortunate Son" by Creedence or something like that. But I think as you moved into the late '60s into the '70s, and I know there's some great bands. I mean, Led Zeppelin, and there's some great bands. But I think to some music fans, the music of the '70s was not that quite that exciting. First off, you had in the '60s you had what's called folk singers that sang about political stuff. In the '70s, they were called singer-songwriters, and they sang about personal stuff. Carole King, Tapestry, James Taylor, and not to knock it, the music at all, but it's singing in a more personal way. You had disco in the '70s. Now, if music in the '60s was supposed to mean something, anything, disco was just for who cares about politics? Just go somewhere and dance. You know, you had that, and then you had music that was called, I think at the time a term was progressive rock. Groups like Yes, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and these groups where in a '50s rock show or a '60s rock show you were supposed to be up dancing or moving or something. Well, I mean, Emerson, Lake and Palmer are playing takeoffs on classical music. Yes, there's albums that there's like one song is the whole side of an album, and you're supposed to sit down and listen to it. So I think disco, the singer-songwriters, and this thing called progressive music, all very popular in the '70s. But to a lot of hardcore rock fans that wanted the rebellion of rock and roll, that stuff wasn't in it at all. And so I think they basically said, just the hell with all that. Let's just go back to the way it was supposed to be, and and it doesn't really matter, like it didn't really matter if you played in a band in the '50s, just like if you were a punk band in the late '70s. It doesn't really matter if you're that good, but just let's play. And I think that's kind of the spirit, and that's so anti, especially like that progressive rock stuff, where, like I said, Emerson, Lake and Palmer are doing takeoffs on Bach or something like that. The hell with that. Let's just go play rock and roll. And I think that's really, to me, the spirit of punk music.